Hello viewers and welcome. This is the first in a series of webcasts produced by Spinal Cord Injuries Australia on the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I am the President of Spinal Cord Injuries Australia and I'd like to introduce our guests. And here we have all the way from Western Australia, Chris Sontag, a participant in the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and our Policy and Advocacy Officer from Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, Tony Jones. Welcome to you both. Now, today we're going to talk about three major aspects of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. First of all, we're going to give you an overview of the scheme and to talk about the kinds of things that the scheme covers and how you can best access the scheme. Secondly, we're going to look at Chris's experience of the scheme and particularly draw on his experience in living and working and how he has used the scheme to benefit and enhance his life. And finally, we're going to look at the impact of the scheme potentially on clients, families, carers. What are the major concerns and questions that have come up about the scheme as it's gradually rolled out throughout Australia? So turning first to Tony, can you tell us what the National Disability Insurance Scheme actually is and what does it mean, especially for people with spinal cord injury?
It's a social insurance model. It's national and it's universal, which is completely different to the old model of disability service provision and what the Productivity Commission called dysfunctional, fragmented and crisis-driven. The new system is to replace that. The beauty of that is it doesn't matter where you live, what state, or how you have your injury. It's based on need, and it will replace a state-based program offering things like personal care, but also beyond personal care. It's things like equipment, home, vehicle modifications, based on reasonable and necessary supports attributable to goals and aspirations, with the aim to increase social and economic participation.
Tony, how's the scheme funded and how's it different from how it was funded before?
What is generally the case at the moment, apart from the trial sites, is funds are state-based, and depending on what state you live in, the types of supports you get are completely different, and it also depends on how you have your injury. So some areas are better provided for than others, whereas this will change. It moves to a national framework, and unlike the old model, which was block funding means that funding went directly to service providers, and the person with disability had very little say in how that funding was used. This turns that on its head, and funding is linked with the individual, and it's the individual, the participant, that has the choice, control and flexibility, and they drive the types of supports that they want in their life. So that's the paradigm shift.
So who's eligible and what are the eligibility criteria?
You need to be under the age of 65. You need to have a disability with a functional impairment, a significant functional impairment attributable to physical, neurological,
sensory?
Sensory is included, as is psychiatric, cognitive, yeah.
And it's got to be permanent, hasn't it?
It's got to be, yes.
And is there any age limit?
Yeah, you need to be under the age of 65 to be able to get into the scheme. They've put that figure in to, I think, keep costs at a reasonable level.
So, any idea of usage of the scheme so far and what's projected?
At the moment, we're in trial phase, and that's in all states. By the end of the trial phase ends in July 2016. By that time, we're only talking about 30,000 members. Just to put that in perspective, when the full scheme starts up from July 2016 onwards, and that will go for roughly 3 years to July 2019, that number will increase vastly from 30,000 to the estimate is 450,000. So that's a significant increase over that 3-year period. And the amount of money that will be going into the scheme is thought to be about $22 billion per year.
So, can you tell me anything about information and linkages and what actually is capacity building?
Another part of the NDIS is called the ILC, or Information Linkages and Capacity Building. The old term for it was Tier 2. And what that involves is information linkages, referrals. Another big part of it is local area coordination. You'll have people in communities located in their community with the whole aim being to connect people with disability up to local services. And that is for people who will be eligible for the scheme, but also for the significant amount of people with disability who won't be eligible.
So, capacity building is about enhancing people's lives in ways that it...
Capacity building is equipping people with disability to make them a little bit more independent, so that they can actually go out and do things themselves, link up with community-based supports, so that they are more involved in the community socially and also economically.
Can you just give us an example of how that might work in real life?
Well, Chris in a moment is going to talk about his experience in the NDIS, and one example of capacity building for Chris would be the exercise program that he's able to use as part of his NDIS funding.
Thank you very much, Tony, for your contribution. And I'd just like to sum up and say the sorts of things that Tony drew to our attention were just the general principles of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, that it's a program based on need, and it is individually focused, and rather than money and funding going to a service provider, it goes to the individual for that person to manage his or her own funds and how he or she chooses to live their life. And finally, we looked at some of the eligibility criteria with a particular focus on younger people with disabilities, and those over 65, unfortunately, are not eligible. Chris, you're a National Disability Insurance Scheme participant in the Perth trial site. So can you tell us the ways in which being on the scheme has changed your life for the better?
Yeah, well, there's some major things that the NDIS has supplied for me that I wasn't able to get before. Whereas now I'm doing an exercise program, which is fully paid for by the NDIS. That allows me to go 3 days a week for 2 hours each time, and I do some intense physio workouts and standing and lots of different types of exercises that really help me develop sort of strength and conditioned to be able to function just like any other normal person, really.
And what other kinds of services do you receive under the NDIS?
Well, the NDIS also pays for my home care, so I also get 2 hours a day, every day. They just come in the morning and they help me out with some things, and I also get my gardening paid for, and I have a cleaning service that they come once a week as well.
So do you get any cooking services or?
No, I do all my own cooking.
Oh, that's good. So how would you suggest to our viewers the best way to use the scheme for their own benefit? You know, what tips can you actually bring?
I think for the viewers or for the people that are going to be newly introduced to the NDIS scheme, the best ways to get what you want out of the scheme is to clearly think about what you want, and maybe even get someone else involved. You know, a lot of the time you can't always think of the things that you might need.
Did you have somebody involved with you
I
to
did
help you?
actually, yeah. My mum helped me a lot with all my my planning and things like that. She works in the disability industry, so she's quite involved in all that sort of thing anyway.
Was there any kind of service provider involved in that planning process from the NDIS?
For some of the equipment, I had the Independent Living Centre in WA help me with a lot of OT work for introducing different accessibility equipment like bathroom commodes and shower seats, and lots of sort of goodies like a hand cycle and a new wheelchair.
So what about transport costs for you, getting around?
Well, I actually drive myself, so I don't require any costs, but I'm aware that they do a vehicle modifications through NDIS.
And
Can I say
yeah,
that?
sure.
I know to date, so far, the NDIS has outlaid $1.7 million on vehicle modifications. It's important to stress that some areas of the country do not have access to any kind of supports along those lines. So once the NDIS is in, that will be a benefit to a lot of people.
Like it's not available at the moment in New South Wales.
In New South Wales, it's not, no.
And it's already been existing in Victoria, is that right?
I think Victoria has access to it, and I'm not sure about some of the other areas, but no, that's one area that is significant.
So as far as the actual provision of transport service, can you enlighten us a little bit more as to actually what that assistance with transport's about?
It depends on the type of plan that you will have and what's in your plan, and relates to your goals and aspirations. But if you are work or you're doing things socially, it will potentially contribute towards that. They've got 3 levels of funding. Actually, what I wanted to ask Chris was, who looks after your funding? Do you look after it yourself, or is it the agency that?
Yeah, actually, they gave me 3 options. There's a self-directed. Yes.
Currently, just to give some perspective to that, that's currently about 6% of participants are self-funded, and the expectation is that that will go up greatly as more participants come on.
Yeah, so I actually manage my own funds. The NDIS has specified an account for me, and they transfer money into that account when I need it topped up.
How do you find that?
It's a little bit of a handful sometimes, but I suppose if you have some time every now and then, it's okay.
So what ways do you think that this scheme has helped you specifically as somebody with a spinal cord injury? And given your own personal circumstances of how you were injured?
I think because of the fact that a lot of people with spinal cord injuries aren't compensable, it really helps to give back people's independence. For me, I was able to buy my own house because of the fact that NDIS is now paying for my exercise program. If they hadn't have paid for that, then there'd be no way I could afford to do both.
So any other ways that you can think of that specifically related to your spinal cord injury that it helps you? I mean, you've mentioned some sort of equipment. What about access to future courses if you wanted to enhance your education or further training? Because you're an electrician.
Yeah, that's right. Well, because I'm an electrician, I can no longer do any of the physical labour, but NDIS has also given me opportunities to assist with going back and doing some further education, like university degree or something along those lines.
Is that something you might like to
Yeah,
consider?
actually, I've recently been considering doing a electrical engineering course through a university.
Can you just give us a little bit of an indication as to the kind, given your the fact that your training is in electricians, how your accident has impacted on your ability to carry out that particular occupation that you did?
Yeah, well, my occupation's obviously it's quite physical, and I did a lot of FIFO work, so that's straight out the window. A lot of mining sites aren't really accessible. So now I work in the office. I help doing a supervisory role.
Did the NDIS give you any assistance with job modification and redesigning the workplace to assist you to become re-employed?
Well, in WA, we actually have a workplace organisation where they help to go back to work. So it's not through the NDIS; it's actually through the state government.
Yeah, that's outside the NDIS.
Yeah.
There are supports along those lines.
Thank you very much, Chris, for sharing your experiences about how the National Disability Insurance Scheme has enhanced your life as somebody with a spinal cord injury. Tony, in your advocacy role, what are some of the common questions that your clients have asked about the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and what information can you give us about how the scheme actually works?
One question we get a lot is for those who are currently over the age of 65, who are receiving disability supports now through the state-based program, such as Community Support Program in New South Wales, but also similar schemes in other states. What's going to happen when the NDIS comes in and how that is going to affect their supports, because as we all know, those aged over the age of 65 won't be eligible. The good news is it's called continuity of support, and it covers their current supports. It's in the bilateral agreements with New South Wales and Victoria. It's called Continuity Support, Schedule D, and it says that there will be no disadvantage and their current supports will be maintained. However, what will change is it'll be at an administration level, so it'll move from a state responsibility across to the federal responsibility.
So what's going to happen in this scheme about the mobility allowance? Is that going to still operate?
Yeah, for those that are eligible for the NDIS, once they get a plan approved, they will no longer receive their mobility allowance through the Department of Social Services, but it will be incorporated in part of their NDIS funding. And there are 3 levels of support funding for transport. The top level roughly is around the same, or is exactly the same pricing of the mobility allowance. There are also, for exceptional circumstances, there is a higher amount, up to around $6,000, but that again depends on what it is that you're doing, employment or community social aspects in your life.
So, Chris, you had some home modifications done. Can you tell us a little bit about what was actually done to your home and how the funding worked out on that?
Yes.
And who assisted?
Yes, well, the NDIS approved for some automatic doors that I had installed for my front door, my garage entrance door, which made it very helpful for me.
How does that work? Can you just explain to us how that works?
Yeah, well, I actually have an app on my phone which is directly connected to the Wi-Fi system in my house. And all I do is open the app, and it's pretty straightforward. So there's just a button for the door to open. As long as I'm in the Wi-Fi range, it'll work.
So what about temperature control or window curtains, etc.?
Well, I'm quite capable of doing all that myself. But I also have my air conditioner is connected to the same type of app, which is basically my house can be controlled through my phone. So for instances like if I forget to leave a light on while I've already gotten into bed, I can simply just open my phone up and turn the lights off.
Any other modifications you had done?
So yes, I also had some flooring installed in my gym, which is it's like a soft rubber flooring just to help with whenever I transfer. Also, if I fall, it's not going to hurt.
Any other modifications?
I had some bathroom modifications done. I got a specially made commode for my toilet, which is really helpful because I don't have a very big bathroom, and a few shower chairs and some rails.
Now, I understand that that if you've already paid for some modification or some particular need that you have, that there's an issue about that. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, that's right. I found out that some of the equipment or modifications that you may have already paid for, considerably expensive items, the NDIS won't reimburse you for. Such things like a wheelchair or a hand cycle or anything expensive.
So what you're saying is you need approval first, and then
That's right. Yeah.
So what about the mobility allowance? Will that continue?
Yeah, I forgot to mention before about those that are on mobility allowance, and if they then become a participant in the scheme, it won't affect their healthcare card at all. They will still receive their healthcare card and all the benefits that it brings. So yeah, that is unchanged and unaffected.
So what about levels of support? There are particular kinds of levels of support that...
You mean with transport specifically? Or?
Not specifically with transport, but what about access to work and study and community? How will the scheme help people access that in a more effective way?
Yep. It's in the plan. It'll be written in the plan, the types of things that it'll be based on their goals and aspirations. And so if they work, it'll be assistance to get up in the morning. It'll also be flexible based on the types of lifestyle the person will have. And again, as well, for vocational supports, things like education. It won't actually cover things that the education system covers. However, it would cover things like if you've got a disability and you are studying and you need some personal care support, it would assist with that in the potentially, yeah. So
what's the process of the scheme being rolled out? How do you see that happening, and how it will affect individuals?
For those that are currently receiving state-based supports, it'll be done in stages depending on your geographical location, and it'll be a fairly smooth transition. When your area is time to actually transition across to the full scheme, you'll get contacted by the NDIA, the agency, and if you've already got a plan in place, they'll look at it, and if it offers a similar sort of supports or is compatible with the NDIS, very little will change, unless, of course, you want things to change and you want a review of your supports. What is potentially a benefit is you may be entitled to extra things that you weren't entitled to under the state-based program, like we mentioned earlier about vehicle modifications for those in New South Wales.
I'd like to thank Chris and Tony for their experiences, both from a policy and practical perspective. Chris for his personal experience of dealing with the NDIA in the scheme itself in Western Australia, in Perth, at the trial site, and the kinds of supports that the scheme can give him in making his life much more independent and active, and really achieving full participation and equality in the community. I'd like to thank Tony in particular for the kinds of policy insights and advocacy insights he's given us into how the scheme actually operates, and the kinds of eligibility criteria and restrictions, as well as the way the scheme will be rolled out. So I'd just like to mention in conclusion that next year in April, SCIA will be holding an expo. And if you want to get more information about the expo, please go to our website, www.scia.org.au. We hope to see you next year in April 2016. Thank you for joining us.